from Heathersage in the Peak District, where I will spend my first night traveling. So I thought after the first video about my first day in freedom, I'd do another one about my first day in proper freedom after moving from London. I say moving, but actually it's more than moving, because now I will constantly be on the move. So if I look strange in some directions, it could be because it is quite a storm here, so I feel a bit haunted in this house. I'm staying in an Airbnb, and yeah, no one else is around. It's a Tuesday in a big park in the UK, so no one is traveling, which is nice, so I can sit in the kitchen and reflect on my first very adventurous day of traveling. I might come back to that later, but first I wanted to talk about a sentence, and that sentence is structure determines behavior. And I came across this article in January. I looked it up on 20th of January, so it was like 2 weeks before I quit, and I think it had an influence. I mean, I was pondering quitting for a while already, but this article describes, so it's quite specific. It's about a poker player, and yeah, he left his job in IT to become a poker player. It's in some ways similar to me, and then again quite different. I won't go into details what I'm planning now. It would lead to a whole new video, but yeah, this sentence structure determines behavior. I found that very interesting, because I think it's true. It's yeah, I want to read like a few sentences of it because it's so very well described. So it says, once a structure exists, energy moves through that structure by the path of least resistance. In other words, energy moves where it's easiest for it to go. And there's a plot, like 3 points, which I find interesting. So the first point is, you are like a river. You go through life taking the path of least resistance. And I think no matter what, that is true. Humans are very lazy. And everyone is, even if they don't admit, I think. And so, yeah. So humans take the path of least resistance. The second point then is, the underlying structure of your life determines the path of least resistance. I think that's also very logical. So we take the path of least resistance, and the structure of our lives defines what that path of least resistance is. So the third point then is, you can change the fundamental underlying structure of your life. So if you change the structure of your life, automatically your whole life changes. I mean, that makes sense, but it's also like, since we as humans will always have a certain laziness, the most powerful thing to do is to change the path of least resistance. So, no. Not to change the path of least resistance, to change the underlying structure. So if you change the structure, I think an eye just went, I didn't control anything anymore. So if we change the structure, then everything else changes. And that energy that I described automatically changes too. Because I will still be somewhat lazy and take the path of least resistance, like in my traveling, in a way. But because I changed the structure so much, everything else changes automatically. And it's like, in a way, that's the lazy form of doing it, because if I change the structure, I don't have to actually do that much in terms of energy change. I just changed the structure, and I noticed that already on my first day of traveling today, which was very interesting. So there was a big storm, and so the train was just standing around for like 40 minutes without moving much, a bit of crawling, and I noticed I got angry already, but that was like just this automatic reaction I have whenever I lose time. And then I realized, wait a minute, it doesn't matter. You have all the time in the world today. You can read, so you won't actually lose time. It's just the train is not moving, and yeah, that's fine. But I still got into this automatic reaction, like when I'm in the outside world, my TE is like, I want to get to the point where I want to go as quickly as possible, but it's not in my control anyway. So yeah, that was like an hour lost because of the storm. Then the trains already, the final destination was earlier, so I had to change trains. And then the train actually hit a tree or a big branch. It was quite an abrupt stop. And I again thought, oh well, we won't be moving for another hour, which turned out to be true. But then then something really strange happened. So I was sitting like in between carriages. So I don't know if that was to avoid people or to sit next to someone, but so I was sitting there, and suddenly Nick Clegg, one of the few good politicians in the UK, I would say, just went into this area between carriages, and I thought, wow, and I didn't know what to say. And then I realized, yeah, I think shy FI didn't know what to say. And afterwards I came up with so many interesting things to tell him. I won't go into details of politics, but yeah, that was another very interesting realization, that I just didn't know what to say and like was overwhelmed. And he actually, like, I was sitting in front of a waste bin, and he had to like tell me, can I throw my chewing gum into that bin? And then he had to throw away a bottle of Coke too, and I was still like saying, yeah, fine, and was acting like if I didn't recognize him. Then I actually think I should at least wish him success in the election on Thursday. But I didn't do it. I was too shy to even say something. So that was my shy FI in action. I already talked about my my impatient TE. Like whenever there's time lost, I get impatient. Like in the end, I lost 2 hours because of the storm and the train problems. But then I thought, yeah, it will always be like that. Just make yourself aware of it, and then you can maybe slowly change this without like actively changing it. In the evening I had to wait in a supermarket, and I realized I was completely calm now. So I was waiting there for like 5 minutes because the cashier was talking to the lady in front of me, and they wouldn't even notice me. Normally that makes me angry, so I don't know, but I probably won't learn like that quickly, or like mini develop my TE. But it was interesting because early in the day I was like stressed out with every minute I lose, but then realizing that it doesn't matter anymore really helped. Yes, I notice I rambled. I wanted to talk about structure determines behavior, but yeah, all these events today, I thought, if this is day one, what's gonna happen in the next like weeks? That's FI and TE on my first day of traveling. And when I arrived here, I noticed, so it rained all day, literally. It didn't stop, like maybe for 2 or 3 minutes in between, but and I realized I really wanted to go outside today, which I was because I traveled so much, but I didn't like go on a walk or something, and I noticed like my inferior TE just wanted to go play in a way. I mean, it's not my playful state, but yeah, I was like a little kid. I wanted to go outside, and I was looking outside the window, but it was always just raining. So yeah, I was wondering if due to the traveling all day, I was like flipped, like could I be an ESFP if I'm like in the outside world? I was really like an ESFP who was sad being inside, which doesn't happen normally. And I didn't even do many NI things. I just, I planned like a walk for tomorrow, so that I guess is NI, but it didn't feel like NI. It was more like SE was taking charge and just sad that it rained all day. That was interesting to observe. And then actually, then I looked up a walk for tomorrow because it will probably rain again quite a lot, so I have to plan it. And I just got stuck. I just researched which walk I could go on like for 90 minutes, and I realized that's a bit too much. So I just in the end decided I will go to a station and start there and be a bit more be a bit more spontaneous. After 90 minutes of planning, that was the conclusion. So yes, so that's my 4 functions in action today, which was very interesting to observe. But back to the structure determines behavior thing. So yeah, I really think we are like a river. So even if we are motivated and energized, or maybe that's only true for introverts, but even then there's a tendency to take the path of least resistance. So I think the most powerful thing is to change the underlying structure, which I did by quitting. And I realize EPs have this need for freedom, so that would also make sense for if I'm flipped and I had that, like, yeah, that wasn't, I mean, it was part of the decision, but yeah, there's like really the need. I feel like a different energy now, which is great. It's a bit like yesterday when I had to pack, I was a bit rushed and thought, oh wow, I won't get like a quiet minute anymore, I will just be traveling. But yeah, that's not true. Like things like today, no one is here. I have a house for my own now, for this night at least. So there will always be quiet periods, so I don't need to be scared. Yes, so that's the underlying structure that I changed. And yeah, I think that can be quite powerful. I mean, I don't know fully yet, but I already sense it. And I want to read a few more things because I think it's a very powerful text, and I will link it in the comments later on. So did I say, so yeah, this was an IT guy who decided to play poker, and yeah, at some point his savings just went to a level where he thought about going back to his IT cubicle job. And yes, so yeah, what's the difference between the world of IT and poker? Structure. One exists within the confines of a cubicle with rules. The other one is a structure designed around freedom. Robert Fritz says, put anything in a structure that leads to fulfillment, accomplishment and success, and that person will have those experiences. So yeah, he describes in the article how he really dreaded this imagination of going back into this cubicle job. And at the end it said, don't commit yourself to a process, I must get a job. Commit yourself to the results you want to see in your life, which I'm pretty sure to involve freedom, travel and happiness. Yeah, and I strongly agreed. I mean, it's probably different for everyone, but well, the happiness and meaningfulness is probably part of what everyone craves, and freedom probably too, although yeah, some people can't really deal with freedom too well, or with being on by themselves maybe. Yeah, I just found that very interesting. All this structure, which is probably my TE. Yeah, and my FI really liked this. There was a dramatic difference between the two orientations. In the first, you are always subject to the whims of circumstance. In the other, you are the predominant creative force in your life, in your own life. And circumstances are one of the forces you use in the creative process. Yeah, and for many people, life is organized around circumstances. And for others, it's creating what they want to create. And there's a dramatic difference. And yeah, this structure, I mean, it helped me for like the 4.5, 5 years in my job, but yeah, now I want to create my own structure, or don't have a structure. Well, I will always create a structure during my travel. But yeah, I'm like the creative force that is described in this article. And I think that will give me quite some energy. I already noticed, I think I'm more energetic today. Yeah, traveled a lot. So I'm probably speaking louder too. Interesting. Yeah. Anything else? I talked about my shy FI, impatient TE, playful SE. Oh, I hear more wind now. Yeah, maybe have a think. Do you think structure determines behavior? Do you think you need that structure? I mean, I can still like, I don't know, it's still only my first day, so maybe I get crazy because I don't have an outside structure anymore. But I think it will more be like the freedom that I craved in a way after being in a job for nearly 5 years. Yeah, I think that it's all. Any questions? I ignored you, UM. I'm sorry. I don't know if you... I can't see who is watching. But, yeah. I was more extroverted, so I was just going through what I wanted to say. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think that's all for today. Oh, did I do this a lot with the key, with the pen? Oh. Anyway, goodbye.